Hello, this is AstrologerCoach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming lunar eclipse in 3 degrees of Libra. Now, this is a very, very powerful full moon, and it is exact on March 23rd at 8:01 a.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time, at 5 a.m. Pacific time, West Coast time in the US, which is also LA time, and at 12:01 p.m. London time. And the reason why I'm mentioning London time is because there is daylight savings time is already active in the US, but it's not yet active in Europe. So for you guys who listen to me from Europe, make sure you keep that in mind. Now, we're still in eclipse season. We're still receiving all these downloads. My last video, I talked about the solar eclipse. And so this full moon is part of the eclipses as well, and is more intense than a typical full moon. And so we're really feeling all of this energy that's right now, things that we're releasing and things that we're kind of like shifting in our lives. And this is normal during eclipse season. So it's very important to just be open to that. And this particular eclipse is sort of like connected to the Libra Aries polarity. And we've been sort of like experiencing these eclipses since 2013. That's when we had the first eclipse in that polarity. And so this one, because this is the last one that we'll be having for the next 19 years in Libra Aries, is sort of like a culmination of those eclipses that started in 2013. And these eclipses were all about healthy relationships with ourselves, with other people. And they had particular relevance to the roles that we identify with in our one-on-one relationships, right? So whatever we think that who we are in particular places in our lives, right? And the different types of roles that we play in different types of situations. So one thing you can ask yourself with this eclipse is, what have you discovered in those areas since October 2013? What has emerged in terms of what roles you do play with other people, right? Now, there's a lot to cover today with this eclipse because this is connected to mutable T-square, and Saturn is stationing at the time of the lunar eclipse. So, and it's preparing to go retrograde for the next 5 months. So we have a lot to cover. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about what lunar eclipses are and what they do to us, right? So lunar eclipses definitely bring the attention to the emotional body, and it's very much about becoming aware of what's been suppressed or ignored. And so we're getting to shift something in our lives, and especially with this particular eclipse, it's connected to relationships of all kinds. And so we can ask ourselves, what roles or contracts need to be redefined or released? Where do we need to create a shift with certain roles or contracts that we have with other people? And where do we need more balance in our lives? Because wherever that eclipse falls in your chart, that's also an area of your life where you need to look for more harmony and more balance, and to see how you can find a more harmonious, peaceful relationship with yourself in that area of your life. Now, the last lunar eclipse we had in that particular degree, in 3 degrees of Libra, was back in March of 1997. And the one before that was March 1978. So if you were around in those years, then think back to those periods and think about what happened back then in 97 and in 78. What is possible now in terms of that energy, and what was going on back then. So just remember, with eclipses, these are 19-year cycles, which means that we're sort of like something happens, and then throughout those 19 years, we're coming to a new place in our lives where it resonates back to that beginning of that eclipse, but it's something different. It's not going to be exactly the same. It's just that we're either finding closure with something, or we're moving to the next level with something in our evolution. So just keep that in mind. So just see what's possible now. Now, eclipses bring a strong focus to endings and beginnings, just in general. And I think we talked about that already in our last video, and when I talked about the solar eclipse, right? But they really push us forward in our evolution and on our soul's journey. So it's really it's really wise to trust as much as you can that whatever is leaving or falling apart at the time of the eclipses, that it's making way for something better in our lives. And the more open we are to change, the easier it will be to go to that next level in our evolution. And sometimes there's also things that come in, new beginnings, right? So it's not always endings, right? So whatever is coming in also can be a part of us needing to move to that next level of our evolution as well, right? So it's just good to be open as best as you can, right? Now the eclipse could be healing a memory around relationships, this particular one. It could also be making a new emotional connection of some sort with another person. It could be moving into a new home or something connected to the home situation. It could be starting a family, something of that sort. And we really get a chance to heal a trauma that was inflicted on us, or possibly also on our parents, if you're too young to have been, that you weren't alive yet in those days. Something that happened back in June of 1981. There was a Saturn transit that moved over 3 degrees of Libra at the time. And also September 1973, there was a Pluto transit that moved over the 3-degree Libra component. And so this lunar eclipse is basically triggering that 3-degree Libra that was already passed by Saturn and Pluto in those times. So there's a resonance back to that, that we're feeling. So if you can remember, in 1981 and 1973, then definitely you will feel that this eclipse will bring something up around that again. And of course, all of this will resonate a lot more with you if you have personal planets or angles within 3 degrees of the eclipse, right? So if you have something close to 3 degrees of Libra, that will be much more forceful for you. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. But you can, if you haven't seen it yet, watch my video on how to read your birth chart, which you can see either on my YouTube channel or on my website. And I will talk about that a little bit later again, okay? Now, we're also invited to take a look at the balance of the feminine and masculine energies, right? And I've been talking about that quite frequently, these past 2 years or almost 3 years, because of that Aries Libra polarity, right? It's very much about finding that feminine masculine balance within ourselves, within our relationships, in the world at large, And so you can ask yourself here, where has it gone out of balance? What happens when there's too much of either or too little? And again, with any of my questions, feel free to just sit with the questions. You don't have to answer them right away. Sometimes it's just good to let the questions resonate and just be with them and see what comes up as you keep dabbling with those questions a little bit, if they keep coming in, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about the eclipse chart in particular. Now, the sun in Aries is connected to Mercury, and this is a call to look at the roles that assertion and independence play in our lives. So we're really being asked to kind of look to see what that means for ourselves. And we're called to find ways to communicate our sense of self in a healthy way. So being totally honest with ourselves and others is really crucial here. And to allow the higher vibrations of Aries to kind of connect with that Mercury energy, right? So the higher vibration of Aries are courage, openness towards something new, being direct about something, developing a healthy sense of identity, kind of connecting to ourselves in a healthy way. And so the spotlight with this Aries energy is definitely on us and on ourselves and our identity, right? What we identify with. Now, the moon in Libra, which is opposite the Aries sun, wants us to work through any issues via collaboration, objectivity, consideration, equality, balance, justice, all the Libra stuff, right? And so here the spotlight swings over to focusing on relationships, the us rather than the me, right? Now Mercury makes an opposition to the moon clearly, because it's conjunct the sun, so it's opposite the moon, right? So it invites us to pay attention both to our feelings and emotional responses that we have, and our thoughts and our logical conclusions that we have, right? Now, questions you can ask yourself here is, how might we express ourselves truthfully without compromise, and consider other people's feelings and needs at the same time, right? So it's really trying to bring that together, that Mercury and Aries energy with that moon and Libra energy, right? To be sensitive to feelings and needs of other people, but at the same time be really still truthful, and to stand with yourself truthfully, right? Now Mars, which is the ruler of Aries, is currently in Sagittarius and is making a trine to the sun in Aries and a sextile to the moon in Libra. So this really indicates that we're likely feel excited about life, and we're willing to make things work in our relationships. We're enthusiastic, we feel brave, adventurous at this time. But the thing is that Mars is also making a square to Neptune in Pisces. So that brings in a little bit of a challenge, right? Which is that we need to learn to slow down a little bit, right? Because the enthusiasm that we're feeling, we may be, going a little bit too fast, right? So we need to check in with our intuition and really let ourselves be guided to what the next action needs to be, rather than just storming into it, just keep checking in with yourself, slow down a little bit and let yourself be guided. And really ask yourself, and in particular for these next 2 weeks, really ask yourself, when I'm in the flow of things, am I the doer, or does doing simply happen? And really be honest with yourself here, really check in with yourself and check to see, what really happens when I am in the flow of things, right? And you can go into memory with this and just think about, how has it been in the past, but also just be in the now and be present to when you're in the flow and you're just going with the energies, are you the doer, or is doing simply happening? And just be with that question, right? Now, Venus, the ruler of Libra, is currently in Pisces and is making a square to Saturn in Sagittarius and an opposition to Jupiter in Virgo. And that's that T-square I've been talking about in the beginning of the video. And Saturn is the focal planet of this T-square. So this lets us know that it's really wise to double check our facts, our reasoning, our assumptions, our belief systems, and really to check and see, do any of these need updating? Am I still in the past with all of this, or am I in the here and now with all of this, And so really double check, Now, since the T-square also involves Venus in Pisces, we're also invited to bring an open heart to this process and to have compassion with ourselves, right? Now, something very profound is happening to us here, especially if we're able to make these adjustments and these shifts in terms of our belief systems, in terms of our thinking structures, right? And if we really have the opportunity here to change our lives for the better, if we're open to really shifting things around. And the key, though, really is self-compassion with this. It's not about checking in with ourselves and punishing ourselves. It's not about, judging ourselves for, not having the right thoughts or the right belief systems, right? It's really about just observing it and being really conscious with ourselves and kind and loving with ourselves about this. I mean, all of this is very much connected to our past conditioning. So it's just normal and natural that as human beings, we kind of are very often on an autopilot with that conditioning. But it serves us to be really conscious, right? So for the next 2 weeks, really keep asking yourself, what shifts might be possible for me if I just let my mind and heart stay open? And really do your best to observe your thoughts. Thoughts are very powerful. Our thinking is very powerful. They are like the first seed towards planting and creating our reality. right? It's the first thing that happens. Thoughts move very fast. So with thinking, we can really start to, get our creative juices flowing, and we can start to create the things that we want in life, right? So therefore, it's very important to take responsibility for our thoughts, take responsibility for what we're planting, what we're seeding in terms of our thinking, right? So if our thoughts about ourselves, about others, about the world are low in vibration, we will only be able to create something that is also low in vibration. And that's why it's really important to be very conscious about this and to really take a look and see which thoughts serve me and which don't, right? So as best as you can, align yourself with your higher truth and, keep in mind that it's important to be compassionate with yourself here with this, right? To really not judge or not punish yourself for having thoughts that are not serving you or that are maybe not high in vibration all the time, right? But to really lovingly guide yourself through this and as best as you can, be really aware, because the awareness is the important part. And being compassionate, self-compassionate with yourself is the second most important part, all right? Because that's how we can create a shift. Now, the Saturn station that I mentioned earlier as well amplifies this T-square even further because Saturn is the focal planet of this T-square. So with Saturn slowing down and coming to a halt, to turn retrograde, its energy gets really exalted in the sky. So it really adds a very strong message to this eclipse, which is pay attention to your beliefs and what you think is true about life. And think again. Think again. What assumptions do you make about yourselves, others, and life? These assumptions that you might have, are they actually advancing your soul's journey? And how can you more fully embody your truth? What might be possible if you decided to walk the talk, right? So again, these are questions you can just sit with for the next couple of weeks, maybe even throughout the next 6 months if you like, and just keep dabbling in and tapping into these questions, and if you like, meditate with them. If you like, journal on them. All of that is good stuff, right? Now, remember that each of us is experiencing this eclipse right now in one way or another, right? Some of us, maybe more intensely than others if you have the eclipse close to one of your personal planets, right? But in general, we may feel overwhelmed, we may feel anxious, and some of us may even have vertigo because the moon is in Libra, right? And Libra is all about finding our balance, right? So we might feel a little bit like, woo, But as best as you can, therefore, be compassionate with yourself and others at this time. This is really important. And, if someone doesn't return your phone call, it's not personal. They may just not be able to. They may be, really overwhelmed right now. Eclipses are definitely Uranian in nature, which means that there's sudden changes that can happen, unexpected things can happen. So definitely between now and April 7th, which is the end of eclipse season, there could be stuff happening that you might not expect. But just remember that whatever it is, whatever comes in right now or leaves right now, it usually happens to help us evolve. And this is something we have to keep in mind. It's not bad stuff. Even if it may seem that way in the moment, sometimes we can only decide in hindsight if something was good for us, right? But just keep in mind that whatever is happening, it is for the best of your soul's journey and your evolution, okay? Now, I already mentioned this in my last video with the eclipses, but I wanted to, with the solar eclipse, but I wanted to say it one more time, as best as you can. Don't jump the gun right now. If you feel compelled to do something, do your best to simply watch and observe. In particular, if you have any ambivalence about an action or you suspect that you are acting out of fear, that is usually a giveaway that you need to just stay calm and just observe, right? Wait until eclipse season is over, which will be April 7th. And the other thing I wanted to say in regards to actions as well, if something happens organically at the time of the eclipses, so if something feels like really in alignment with your soul's journey, something that's new, that's beginning, then definitely go for it. It's more about actions that you take because you're anxious or because you're wanting to rush something. Those are the kind of actions you want to stay away from. So just double check whether you're coming from love or fear, whether it feels right or whether it feels rushed, right? And remember that impatience is a form of fear, right? It's the fear of not trusting the timing of the universe, right? So we feel very often, our mind very often feels like things are going too slow, right? And that's because the mind moves very fast. But it doesn't mean that necessarily is the truth, right? Now, if you do have an ascendant, personal planets, or points in 0 to 6 degrees of Aries, Libra, Capricorn, or Cancer, then this eclipse is definitely going to impact you a lot more than other people. But even if you don't have personal planets in those degrees and signs, take a look at the house placement, like I already mentioned earlier. That is really important. The house placement of where the 3 degrees of Libra and Aries falls in your natal chart, that can really show you how this lunar eclipse affects you in terms of the area of life that are up for development, or where there might be some shifts happening for you within the next 2 weeks to 6 months. All right. Now, if you don't understand what I just said and you don't have your birth chart even, definitely watch my video, How to Read Your Birth Chart. In that video, I will talk about how to apply my videos and my weekly forecasts to your birth chart, and I will also tell you how to get a birth chart. And so feel free to email my assistant at info@astrologercoach.com and just put recording in the subject line, and she will email you a high-res version of that video with some handouts as well. All right. Now, last announcement that I want to make is my monthly life forecasting forum, which I started a month ago. This is a new thing. We're going to be doing this every month on the day of the full moon. And this one will be on March 23rd, on the day of the lunar eclipse, right? So it will happen at 7 p.m. East Coast time, 11 p.m. London time. And the reason why I mentioned London time is because of the daylight savings time that we have in the US already now and not yet in Europe. You might be able to join me for the monthly life casting forum if you live in London. This will be a 90-minute webinar, and you can ask questions. It will be interactive. I've started doing this because I really want you guys to get maximum support and be in alignment with the stars. So this is really exciting for me because I get to speak and connect with you guys in real time and not just be, like on YouTube. Like I can't really connect with anybody that way other than with the comments, right? So this webinar is really going to be great. So I'm very excited. The fee for the webinar is $24, and you can register for the webinar anytime from now on. It's on my website at AstrologerCoach.com. So also I want to mention that no matter whether you are an astrologer beginner, intermediate, advanced, pro, everyone is welcome. Everyone is, I'd be delighted to have anybody on board who wants to join us. And I believe that everybody will get something out of it since you can ask questions. So, and I will also be presenting and giving you some context as well so that you know what to ask questions about as well, right? Now, again, the fee is $24. You can register on my website at AstrologerCoach.com. It's right below the Saturn and Sagittarius video. If you scroll down on that page, you can register for the monthly forecasting forum. All right. And I will also be mentioning, making some announcements in my newsletter as well, just as reminders, and my weekly forecasts too. So if you haven't gotten a chance to sign up for those yet, feel free to do that now. And just email my assistant at info@astrologercoach.com and just write weekly forecasts or newsletter in the subject line, or both if you want to receive both. And my assistant will add you to those mailing lists, to the appropriate ones. The newsletter goes out twice a month, and the weekly forecasts go out every Sunday evening. All right, so if you have any general questions for me about the lunar eclipse, feel free to reach out to me via email at Sonja@astrologercoach.com. That's SONJA@astrologercoach.com. I'm happy to answer any general questions. If there are any personal questions that you have that require of me to pull up your birth chart, I will ask you to book a reading on my website at AstrologerCoach.com, just so I can honor my time and make sure that I can really answer your question fully and to your satisfaction. All right? So I hope that makes sense, and have a fantastic lunar eclipse. Remember, there's still downloads coming in, and we're still needing to stay really open and stay as grounded as you can, and just kind of like let yourself be guided by the energies that are out there. Okay? So have a good one. This is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.